Welcome, beautiful Sovereign Sisters, to this week's Sovereign Sisterhood Movement podcast episode, where Elvira and I are going to be diving into a really powerful topic, one that a lot of women tend to struggle with and really work to try to break as a cycle in their generational healing journey. And what I'm referring to is love, relationships, and breaking free from toxic relationship patterns. So, if you have ever found yourself in repeating cycles of betrayal, of dependency, codependency, or even self-sabotage in your relationships, then this episode is for you. Together, Elvira and I today we will be exploring how these patterns actually stem from generational trauma, how the power of holistic healing, Kundalini yoga, Course in Miracles, spiritual psychotherapy can help us cultivate the most important relationship, which is the relationship with ourself, which in turn changes all other relationships. And we're going to look at how to break this cycle once and for all. So join us. Elvira, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm also excited to be able to sit with you and talk to you about this particular subject because I don't know, would you agree that this is probably one of the biggest challenges that women actually have to face and deal with?
Oh, definitely. It's a challenge, not just for us, I think males as well.
Sure.
It goes back to we only know what we know. We only know what we saw growing up. And unfortunately, there's some generational patterns that are not the healthiest way, and we need to learn a better way.
And
And
you
take
just
the good, take the good that we as well.
Yeah, and you completely nailed it because what you said was we only know what we were raised and how we actually were educated through what we saw in our parents.
Yes.
And that's the whole thing because w- I think we're coming into this era and we've been talking about toxic masculinity even in a past episode. So if you missed that show or that episode, I suggest that you go back to our YouTube channel and find it because that show really leads into what we're talking about here. Not only toxic masculinity, but abandonment, and then the guilt that comes with it. And the whole thing about toxic masculinity is we're in an era where women, of course, there's a feminist movement and, I don't need a man type of attitude. And a lot of the times it's because I hear a lot of women complaining about men, saying that all men are trash and everything that they attract, every man just cheats on them or leaves them. And that is so far from the truth. And the reason that I say that is from a personal experience too, because growing up, like you said, watching my parents and still watching them today, like in their very unique, we'll just call it that, relationship, you kind of just get used to that that's the way marriage is supposed to be. And I think we as women say, I will never have the relationship that my parents have, and we do everything possible to not. And then all of a sudden, you find yourself attracting the same man over and over. You break up with this one, and then the next one, why does the exact replica of what you exactly said you didn't want? So for me, this was a very sacred journey. In fact, it was one of the biggest cycles that I had to break in my marriage. We've been married, my husband and I have been married for 26 years now. And I know you've been married for a long time. And I don't know about you, but for me, it was not all a love and light. What about you?
No, I agree completely. I've been with my husband, I think over 26 years. We met and started dating, and we've been married legally like 23 years, 23 and a half years, something like that. But we've been together pretty much 26 and a half years. So pretty much around the same. And definitely one of the biggest challenges. We've had a lot of ups and downs, and there were some times that were really, really rough, on the verge of divorce.
Mhm.
So there's definitely patterns there that we keep repeating, that I think about guys that I used to date and how toxic those relationships were. And at some point, even in my marriage, it became very toxic with each other. I can't say it was all him. There were times where it was even me causing the problems. And that's something that we need to break, because we do see that. I do see that growing up. the aunts get together, my mom would get together, and they would just trash talk men.
Yeah.
All men are like this, all men are cheaters, and that's not true. You
Right.
know, I didn't we can't generalize, just like they men cannot generalize us and say all women are like this. They can't put us all in a box.
1,000%. But that's the whole problem around that, is that it becomes a program in us. Like same thing with you and we were on the verge of divorce. I remember in 2013 before I began my healing journey, and I blamed him. I really did think he was the only problem. I thought that later I discovered I was just as at fault, right? But before my healing journey, it was just his fault. Everything, the reason
Mhm.
why I was unhappy, the reason why I did things I did, it was only his fault. And it was because of that program for me. My grandmother didn't have a very good relationship with my grandfather on my mom's side because there was betrayal, but there was the same thing on my father's side. And they at that point, you know, women in the 50s, they don't really talk about, or they don't stand up to their husbands, right? There's a lot of machismo in our culture in Mexico. But grandma, you know, she never remarried after grandpa left or he was murdered. And she always had this idea that men were the scum of the earth, that men were just not good. And so for me, my mom was raised in that way. And for me, it was that toxic masculinity that we talked about in the last episode, which go listen to it, was like, I had barriers up all the time. I didn't know how to be intimate. But ultimately, what I realized was that I had such a broken relationship with myself that even though I was saying out loud, I will never attract the same relationship as my parents. The truth is that my programming was my magnet that kept repeating the same toxic relationships. And what's worse is that I stayed in this victimhood for, you know, we got married in 98 till 2013. That's a long time to believe that I was the victim and that it was always my husband's fault and that I couldn't let him in because the abandonment stuff that we talked about, right? Like he's gonna leave me anyways, or he's gonna hurt me. So if that's the case, I'm gonna hurt him first. And not only that, it was so chaotic. Like I remember at the beginning, our relationship, we got together in high school. It was beautiful. I mean, our son, I was pregnant at 16, but he was created in pure love. I always tell him, like, you were created from love. When I was pregnant with him, I was at peace as a 16-year-old. I was at complete peace. I was just so happy to be with my husband because we loved each other so much and there was so much beauty. But then came life, right? My son was born. Imagine 17 years old, trying to pay all the bills, him having two jobs. I had two jobs. You better believe the patterns of what I saw mom and dad started to come up. And we lived that way until 2013 when I went on my healing journey and I said, you know what? I have to stop blaming the world and I have to really take accountability because what is it was so weird that I kept blaming everyone for my unhappiness, but I was the common denominator. I was the always the common denominator. And it was a real like come to Jesus moment where I was like, what if I think I heard it somewhere in a book too, like you heal yourself 7 generations before you and after you're healed. I was like, well, what if I healed myself and I stopped focusing on him? What if that's the path? And that's what led me to where we are today.
I think the majority of us have been in that same situation because I totally relate. I in you start life starts happening, you fall in love and you start having babies and you get married and you get the house and and then life happens.
Right.
And then we start unconsciously falling into these patterns that we saw growing up of these toxic patterns, unfortunately, which I always say this in the podcast because I feel people get very sensitive and they feel they're being attacked, like our parents or our grandparents. They're like, well, you're not no, I'm not saying you did it purposely. It's just we only know what we know. And I did see that with myself. I have to recognize that I started doing things how my mom used to do in her marriage. And my husband was doing stuff because they come with their own stuff,
Yes.
their own inner child of what they saw growing up. And my husband can now admit and accept, yeah, my dad used to do this and he was continuing that pattern. And many times we would have arguments where I would tell him, okay, if, and it was even before I started this journey, I would tell him, okay, so if we already saw what your dad did and how your mom reacted to it and how the relationship is, why are you still continuing to do the same things your dad did? Because that's the path you want to take it. That's how you want. And he's like, no. So why are we doing it, continuing these patterns where we already see where it goes? It's like when I tell my kids, if you see your friend or you see your cousin, you see who, because we can learn from everybody around us. There's so much, it's all a school. If you see somebody go down walking this path and they go down the cliff, they fall off the cliff.
Yeah.
Why are you going to walk that way? It just doesn't make sense. But we're so programmed into doing the same thing over and over again. And I see it in my family, 4 generations repeating the same cycles.
Right.
And they keep blaming everybody outside, the men, the spouses that come into the family. And instead of looking in the mirror and see what are we doing that we keep attracting these type of spouses or partners in our life that keep repeating the same cycle, because at the end of the day the bloodline is the same denominator one way or the other. You know what I mean? It's the same thing. It's like we keep picking these men. Somebody told me yesterday, why do I like bad boys? And I'm like, I get it. I was the same way. I'm like, you know our favorite comedian, Franco Scamilla?
Yes, 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 yes.
I don't know if you heard him when he says, he talks about it. He's like, why is it that teenage girls, they always like the bad boys? And they see him, they're like, I want that one. So he could hit me, he could get me pregnant, and then he could just leave me. And he's like, I, that's the one that I want. And it's like, oh my God.
But
Why
we're
do
really
we pick
doing
those
that.
men? Not that our husbands were that,
Right.
maybe at some point they were, I don't know, but
Yeah. But it sounds incredibly insane. But the whole thing of what you're saying is that it's the program.
yeah.
It's unconscious. You don't know what you don't know. And if all you grew up was seeing chaos, even if you say it with your voice, I don't want that relationship, your nervous system has been wired for chaos. Your nervous system is actually it's wired in our mother's womb. So whatever she was going through with that, and if grandma was going through with grandpa, guess what? Because mom was already in grandma when grandma was doing that,
Yeah.
then it is literally a program that gets wired where if there's not cortisol kick or adrenaline, which is what is it? Chaos, drama. Many women, I used to be so notorious for this. Things were good. Let me bring up a little fight here. Oh, you didn't do that right. You didn't do that right. You didn't do that.
I have to recognize I did that. Yes.
1,000% over nothing. Over
Yeah.
nothing. Again, why? Because the problem is deeper than that. The problem was that I had a broken relationship with myself. I had patterns of generational trauma, not only seeing, okay, yeah, this is what what my parents showed me, and I don't want that, but it wasn't that. It was the whole fact that growing up with abandonment wounds, right? Not when it's so weird how we do this unconsciously, but we literally pick the bad boys that you were talking about in a way to punish our parents. We don't
Oh
know
yeah.
we're doing this
Yeah.
consciously,
Mhm.
but what's the best way to get revenge on our parents for what they did to us? Again, we don't know we're doing this consciously. Let me attract this one guy who's gonna treat me like shit, who's gonna lie to me and betray me. When if we were to change our energy, which is our nervous system, the way we are basically more regulated, which is healing, where we do the work of forgiveness for ourselves, for our parents, that magnet changes completely. And all of a sudden, I mean, even my friends, when I started doing this healing work, I don't have even close to the same level of friends that I have now. You're like my longest friend because you and I went on this healing journey together, so we stayed in the same frequency. It doesn't mean that my old friends or those old people are less than me or worse. It's just we're not in the same vibration. I used to see the same people. I don't know if this happened to you, but I used to see the same people all the time at the stores, even in Phoenix and Arizona is huge. But why would I see the same people? It's the magnet. Now I don't see any of those people anymore because I've changed. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Oh yes. And it's crazy because when you said that we pick these men like to get back at our parents or something, because I do remember my mom would be like, what are you doing? Like, what do you see in this guy? Like, or she would tell my sister. And it's so true. And it's so sad that we would, it's kind of, I had this thought that came in. It's kind of like when people commit suicide,
Yeah.
it's like to show the world, look at
Yes.
what you did to me. And we do this to ourselves in our relationships, in our friendships, with our spouses, with our partners. It's like a way to get back to see, for them to see, look what you did to me. Look at it, what you did to me, how much it affected me that I ended up in this relationship.
Correct.
Oh my God, I just saw that right now. That's how we do that unconsciously. I have like a knot in my throat. Like, wow, like why would we do that to ourselves?
Because we're not aware. It's not that we're doing it on purpose. That's the whole thing. And that's the sad part that I women continue to say, all men are trash or all that could not be farther from the truth. It's that you have to change your beliefs about men. But beyond that, you have to change your beliefs about you,
Yes, yes,
your
yes,
worth, and who you are. You know, one of my teachers, Guru Jagat, would always say that relationships are the highest form of yoga because they require the most tolerance. And I heard another psychotherapist, I don't even know who it was, who said that your children don't need a relationship where there's no fighting. The children need to see the most successful children in relationships when they grow up is when they could see the parents, how do they resolve the conflict. That's the whole thing, because it's not about not having conflict, it's how are you going to resolve it. And if you are broken from inside, you're running on generational patterns of trauma because of abandonment, because of what your mom or dad did or whatever, you are absolutely not going to be in your highest form of yoga. You're going to be attacked. You feel attacked all the time. You take things personal. You want to retaliate and do all those things. You know, relationships are about expanding what's good in the person. That's what relationships, men, all they want is a girl that doesn't complain and that isn't always bitching and isn't always in a negative mood. So if you cannot see the good inside of you, how the hell are you going to see the good in anyone? And that's what the course calls those special relationships. Remember, we've talked a lot about that. We think, oh, even as mothers, oh, I love my kids unconditionally. Really? Do you really? When they get home and they bring a C or a D, what do you do? How do you treat them? Or when they're not behaving to your standards, how do you treat them? We do that to our partners
yes,
instead of focusing on what's good in them, because all men have something good in them. We focus on what is bad on them. We micro focus on it. Who's going to want to be in a relationship with someone like that? But the
yes,
reason why we can't focus on what's good on them, you're going to say, or people are going to say, women are going to say, well, you don't know what I've been through. You don't know what this motherfucker did to me. You don't know all this
yeah,
stuff, you know? Like I was like that. I
yes,
know. But because of the work that I did of forgiveness for myself and forgiveness for him, because believe me, we should have been divorced a long time ago and all sets and standards. When I healed myself and I saw what was good about me, oh my God, now I feel like I'm married to a whole new man. He literally now is like my dream man. That man that I always wanted, that I always like needed, that I always craved, what I saw as the perfect man. That's how I see him now. But the only reason I see him that way is because I see that inside of me. Does that
yes.
make sense?
Oh, definitely. I completely went through the same thing. And once I started working on myself and healing myself, there were times he would make fun of me, especially when he would see me doing my sadhana, and he would go into the room, and he every time I would be done or whatever, and he would be like, "Oh yeah, I went into the room and I saw you. You were floating like 5 feet up in the air." I'm like, "Whatever, whatever." But once he started seeing that I was able to accept and acknowledge and look at myself in the mirror and acknowledge the mistakes that I had made or apologize and recognize. And he started seeing the changes, a more calm nervous system.
Right.
He felt comfortable himself to also look in the mirror, to also accept and acknowledge where he was messing up and to do the changes. And then now it's you feel you have that safe because we want them to be all loving and to do for us because we see in the movies, sometimes they overdo it, obviously, in the movies, but we want this love, but it's the same, it goes back to the same thing. If we're always picking at them, they're like, well,
Yes.
nothing I do is ever good enough for you, then why am I even trying?
Right.
But once you change the dynamic, they start coming, they feel safe
Right.
and they start coming around as well, where they start being more kind to you, more loving to you, and you see the changes happening, and you're like, wow, it was so simple and we couldn't see it because we were so accustomed to the old ways of doing things. Instead of now, I see all the good things in him because before, the same thing. I would only see the bad things about him or complain about the bad things about him. Now I'm like, no, like I don't know what I would do. Like he does so much that we have to work as a team because sometimes I tell him, yeah, you're always the one checking the cars, this and that. And he's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm like, well, I take care of other things. He's like, no, yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. It's working as a team. You start even working as a team better, because that's what a marriage is. And it's not perfect. There's
No.
times I got upset with him just the other day, this week on Tuesday. I was like, don't talk to me.
Yeah.
Wednesday, he comes home and he's like, buenos dias. And I'm like, buenos dias.
Right.
And I was pissed. And he's like, you still mad? I'm like, yes, 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 I am still upset with you. And then we talked it out. He's like, chaparrita. And then we talked it out. And we're like, okay, everything's fine. You know, because life is gonna happen. We're gonna have disagreements. But it's like you said, how are we showing our kids now? Before it was just toxic the way we would fight and even the way we came back together. Now it's different. You know what I mean? It's more calm. We have a discussion, or sometimes we get a little bit more upset, but it's not like before, it's not like before.
1,000%, because it's not about not having problems or challenges. Hello, we're souls that are evolving, different stresses of life. You lose a job, you get a new job, you grow your business, somebody in your family transitions, you get sick. I mean, how many times does that happen, right? Or even just being hangry. My husband is the worst person to be around when he's hungry.
That would be me.
You too?
Yes.
Like, I know when he's hungry, I'm just like, oh my God, feed the guy, feed him, because it's gonna go down. And it's like that. And what I always tell my kids is, my sons, now that they're older, right? Is look at how we resolve our problems now. Before it was egotistical, it's your fault, blaming, no one was allowed to be heard. Shit happens in relationships. That's why it is the highest form of yoga. But when you know your worth, they do change and they do treat, I mean, so differently because they're so scared to get close to you prior to that. And it goes both ways, by the way. There's the toxic masculinity of codependence there, but then there's the other side where a lot of women struggle with, like, they're like needy. I mean, I never got to that point, but my side was just as bad because I almost broke up our marriage because I wouldn't let him in. But then the other side is the codependency of like nagging, of he's gonna cheat on me, all that stuff of just being one of those wives that's always like checking his phone and all these different things. Even if he's never given you a reason to do that, they sense that.
Oh
They,
yeah.
it's all energy. And
I actually did both. I did the neediness and the toxic of always criticizing and picking on him.
true,
And they feel that and they're like, I'm not playing this. He was like, I'm not playing this game with you. Go
right.
play somewhere else. When I stopped playing the victim role, when I stopped playing the little poking and nagging, that's when everything changed. But we're not even conscious we're doing it
That's
because
so
we're
true.
so used to seeing it.
Yeah, you're 1,000% right. Because now that I think about it, I was very like, I had walls up at the beginning of our relationship, but then when we began our healing journey and when I found out everything that had occurred and everything between both of us and we brought it all up to the light, oh my God, I became that person, like just worried and no trust and just like what's gonna happen and all this, which it was, I think I didn't last there a long time. It was literally like a couple of months because I became aware of it. I was like, who is that? I've never been this person in my life. And for him, it was fucking weird. Like he was just like, I've never seen you in that state. Like, what do I do with you? You know, I think it was worse for him seeing me like that because we do tend to marry what we wish we would have seen in our parents too. And to be honest with you, we pick each other because we both have very similar actually childhood traumas where we can both then play out the childhood trauma as adults. That's why, again, you say I don't want the same as my parents, but then you get the exact same thing.
Yes, yes. I do see actually how my husband is very similar to my dad.
Yeah.
They were both like this, very chill,
Yeah.
chill, chill. And then all of a sudden something happens and
Mhm.
it's like a huge earthquake and we're like, whoa, what happened? It would throw us off. But the majority of the time they were very chill,
Yeah.
very chill. And they've always been kind of like that, which I
Mhm.
think I think we obviously pick each other
Yeah.
because we're trying to heal that. We keep replaying it because we're trying to heal that inner child wound.
Right.
I think as Lizzie was saying in A Course in Miracles that we all have these huge abandonment issues.
Absolutely.
Maybe some of us have it more than others. I was telling my sister the other day, I'm like, me and my husband would get in arguments, and my mind would go, "We're getting a divorce."
Mhm. Right away.
I'm like, he's gonna remarry somebody else.
Hmm.
Whenever I have to see him something with the kids, I'm gonna have to see him with this other woman. How am I gonna do this? Like my mind would just take off. It's insane.
Yeah.
And I know it's insane because I'm like, why does my mind do that?
Mhm.
And then later, we make up and I'm like, okay, so we're not getting divorced. My mind we were already divorced, you remarried and you had kids and like,
Yeah.
we just take off. It's insane how the mind just does its own thing.
Yeah. Because of the freaking program. And
Yeah.
we take it that far out and over nothing. That's why they say like people get a divorce. They don't even get a divorce over the big things like a cheating or something. It's like he forgot to take out the trash. I'm done. I'm done.
You know what I just realized? Remember I was telling you the other day about my grandfather, Santiago? So he was married. Well, he never got married to my abuelita, but he was with my abuelita. They had their kids. He left with another woman and had kids. That's what plays out in my head. I just realized that right now. That's what plays in my head. We got in
Wow.
an argument. We're gonna get a divorce. He's gonna remarry somebody else, and then I'm gonna have to see him, and he's gonna have kids, and I'm gonna end up by myself. That's what goes in my head. I just realized that right now. Wow.
See, and this
Wow.
stuff is so ingrained.
Yes, that is God. That's why I tell people God is so loud,
Yes,
and that's why it's so important to talk about these topics
absolutely.
because when he sees okay, she's ready or he's ready, he's gonna come with the signs and the messages that
Uh-huh.
we need to hear in order to break those cycles.
1,000%.
Because
A thousand.
that's how ingrained that is. That I just realized that right now. Wow.
Now, in your situation, was grandma always telling you this story, or you just heard it once, or did you even meet him or anything like that?
I never met him.
Okay.
It was just the story the family always told.
Okay.
This is the story we all know.
Because that was a question that I got actually from and in TikTok, one of the videos that I posted, one of the girls said, "Do you have to have known the story of what happened or met these people for it to impact you?" And I was like, "No." Even this is even like Holocaust, like they were looking at Holocaust survivors and these great grandkids had high levels of anxiety, high levels of depression, and they didn't even know the story of their grandparents. So that's how crazy it is. It's that wire. Same thing with there was a big famine that happened like in the 1930s. I think it was in a Dutch famine, they called it, somewhere in Europe. And the same thing, the children 5 generations later suffered with eating disorders or felt like there was not enough food, and they never met their grandparents and they hadn't even heard the stories yet. And there's a lot. There's science. The other day my son sent me this article about how they discovered that memory, that our blood holds memories. So you don't have to have even known. You don't even have to have known the story. We know the story. I heard that story all the time, that my grandfather was a worthless blah blah blah, and that men are this. And I saw my other grandpa. He's a hoot, man. He was such a good time, like best grandpa in the world, but un mujeriego. He ended up marrying my grandmother's sister after she died.
Oh
So
my God.
that made a lot of people like upset in our family, but he was so charismatic. I swear to God, that guy had no guilt in him at all.
Yeah,
He
that's one of
was
my grandfathers.
right. So
Yes.
you never, I never held resentment. Everyone just forgave him because he's such a
Yeah.
good guy. But we don't necessarily have to know what happened. In fact, even if you're an orphan or you don't know anything about you, those programs are wired in your nervous system. It's actually your personality. It's who you are, which is why, like you said, it's important to talk about these things, to actually get it out and do more healing work. Because I don't know for you, let's talk about what did you do to change to the relationship that you have now, which I'm assuming it's changed and evolved, right?
Oh yes. It was a multiple things. Like I've said before, I when I started this journey, it was because I literally felt my soul was dying. I was suffocating. And I knew I needed to do, I was looking for something, but I didn't know what I was looking for. And we have to listen to God because He will send us the messages. And a girlfriend of mine was like, yeah, let's go to this program, blah, blah, blah. And we kept putting it off. And then somebody else mentioned it. And then somebody else mentioned it. And I'm like, okay, this is a sign. This is what I have to go to this program because obviously God is telling me it keeps coming up.
Yeah.
So I started with this coaching program. It was 3 months. It was amazing. I loved it. I felt like this huge burden got lifted off my shoulders. And then from there, it was like I got addicted. So I
Mm,
started speaking to psychologists and then other coaching and reading books, well, listening to audiobooks or podcasts. It just constantly, it was around the same time I started practicing Kundalini yoga. That coaching program came like a couple months after you had opened Satori, and I started practicing Kundalini yoga. And I always remember Yashira saying, she was our teacher. She would say, we're gonna start with the 10 bodies in Kundalini yoga. And me and you were always the consistent ones that were always, we didn't miss a class, especially when she was doing the 10 bodies. And she said, I've always noticed that people who start Kundalini yoga with the 10 bodies end up, she said, end up doing amazing things. That's what she said. I don't know if I'm doing amazing things, but that's what she said. But that to me is like I've said before, I did certain meditations that I couldn't explain where my
mm,
soul felt so happy.
mm.
Like this is something my soul was like, finally, you know? Finally you're here. So it was a multiple things. I kept fighting the Course in Miracles until finally one day, I think out of desperation, I think that was the year, I believe that was the year I finally filed for divorce. We were in separate bedrooms. We wouldn't talk to each other. It was the hardest thing ever because we are crossing each other constantly in the hall, in the kitchen, whatever, but we wouldn't speak to each other. So I just started committing every Tuesday to listening to A Course in Miracles, to the study group, to be just because I just couldn't do it. And then finally, I kept fighting joining the academy. And then every time I would look into, first I was like, it's too expensive. And then the price went up, and I'm like, and then it kept, I'm like, I need to do this. This is, I need to stop and just do it. And that was actually the same year that that I had filed for divorce, and finally me and my husband, I don't even remember how we reconciled, what conversation we had. I don't know how that happened, but that's when I joined the academy. So that's when even more healing started to happen. Yes. And I
Um,
haven't stopped. It's like an addiction now
right,
because it's so much awareness coming.
right.
Just like I told you earlier, I woke up yesterday. God woke me up at 4 in the morning, and He's like, "Yay, you're ready!" And He's like sending me all these aha moments. And I'm like, "Oh, that's why this. That's why that. Okay, I understand." You know,
Oh my
He's
God. It sounded like you were on a mass, like a jet, like you were doing all these different things. But notice how everything that you were doing was for you. You were healing you. So
Yes.
it's not like you went, because we have somebody in our community who was healing her relationship. And she said she went to a relationship marriage counselor or whatever. And she's like, what a waste of time, because first of all, it just made us fight more.
Yeah.
And no one ever told me that if I healed myself, that all my relationships were healed. Now, in her situation, the healing was the divorce, which many of you ladies, that's the healing you actually need. Okay, we're gonna talk about that right now because my grandmother, I think her biggest thing of was the fact that she felt so frustrated that this was happening to her, and that in the 50s women had to stay with their husbands even if whatever they did to them. So that you have to learn to discern that. Do I believe that all relationships are healable? 1,000%. Because if you really knew like the history of what my husband and I went through, you would think, what the fuck? Like there's no way you all could have healed that. And I'm talking about real healing. I'm talking about I don't get triggered, he doesn't get triggered. We trust each other to the X point. Like there's no mistrust, there's no disrespect, there's no what it was before, lies and everything like that. But that for me, it was very similar to you. I started with the Course in Miracles in 2008, actually, but I wasn't consistent because I was like, I hate this. This is so stupid. And that's when my spiritual awakening started. Then him and I got separated in 2013, actually. That's when we hit the worst point ever. And that's when I started to go on a spiritual quest. I was studying all these different spiritual traditions. Kundalini hadn't come into my life yet, but I was doing other yogas. I was into Bikram still and doing Hatha, and it was not like Kundalini, because when Kundalini came, I was like, where have you been? Like you said, like it's God reminding me of my essence, of who I really am. But Course in Miracles was very instrumental because the Course in Miracles started to teach me about forgiveness, which is why I rejected it so much. So it kind of led me on like this journey. And when Kundalini Yoga finally came into my life, because we went to the jungle together, and my husband and I to the Amazon jungle to heal and work with plant medicine, but that didn't heal us. Like it actually, that was what brought down all the barriers to all the basically lies and all the ways we were like just pretending and staying together for the kids and all that stuff. And when Kundalini Yoga came into my life, that's when my nervous system started to become more regulated. I started to heal, and I approached him and I said, because in Kundalini Yoga there's a lot of there's not a lot. There's 7 specific kriyas. Remember we talked about the relationship kriyas?
Yes.
And they're for actual relationships, for two people to do them together, because when you put two people's energy together, it's really, really powerful. So I told him, we have to do this meditation together. And if we don't do this meditation together, we're gonna end up divorced, because this is too much. We never went to marriage counseling. We actually tried marriage counseling early on, and it didn't work at all. Like it made us more angry. So then we would do this meditation. It was only 3 minutes, and we did it for like a year. And believe me, there were times where we got up from the meditation where I don't want to sit next to you. I hate you. There were days where it was horrific. There were days where I couldn't, we would skip. We would have to start over. We wanted to do 40 days consistency. We were so mad at each other that we couldn't even do that. Can I tell you now, looking back, that that meditation saved our life, saved our marriage, because not only was it doing the energetics of rewiring the nervous system, but God, it made us like feel emotions that were so horrific that we would have just tucked under the rug, and we would have pretended like it wasn't there. But
Yeah.
ultimately, I feel like my path was very similar to yours. It was because I worked on myself first, that then he came around. And not, I don't think all men need to do the meditation with you. I think that the husband can heal just by you healing yourself, don't you think?
Yes, because my husband doesn't meditate. I feel his sadhana, his meditation is to be outside.
There you
He
go.
has a green
Mhm.
thumb. He's very good with plants. He loves nature. So that's, to me, that's his meditation. I don't, but also me working on myself, it was just a ripple
1,000%.
effect, a ripple effect. And unfortunately, not, it doesn't work for everyone, but that's just
Right.
showing you who's not supposed to be in your life, and just learn from that relationship so you don't keep repeating those patterns, because they all come to teach us something. Our biggest, like you've always said, our biggest Judas are our biggest teachers, teaching us what not to do, what to do, and what needs to change so we could do better for ourselves, for our kids, for the everyone that comes after us. Yeah.
Yeah, and then but that's the whole thing about it is that you win. When you jump on the healing journey, you win either case because like you said, either the relationship gets stronger and there are many women in our community where they healed their marriages, right? But there's also the women that got a divorce, and that's also healing
Yes.
because not all the time, and like you said, your husband, he's into nature. That's his meditation. My husband too. He does practice Kundalini yoga still, but he's incredibly good with like visualization. So he likes the meditations more where he's visualizing and Kundalini, he says, actually makes him really, really hot. He says he's very sensitive to it, but he still practices every single day. And that meditation, we did practice it together for every single day. He doesn't practice every single day, but he's very good. Like he'll miss like 1 day or 2 days, but again, as long as he can be in nature and he can be out, then that's his meditation too. So
Yeah.
do not, I don't want anyone to get the idea that in order for their marriage to heal, that they have to force their husband to jump on the healing journey. It happens naturally and it happens in their own way. And if you try to control that, you're gonna get in worse trouble. Like I
Oh,
remember
yes.
I remember I would ask my teacher, how do I get my kids to meditate at one point a long time ago when they were still in high school, and my teacher was like, you can't force anyone. You have to just live by example. And you living by example, they'll see what you're doing and they'll get curious and they'll do it. That's exactly what happened, my especially my youngest one, because my oldest one, him and I went to school together to Kundalini yoga school, and he's very much been into meditation. But the youngest one, he just saw me do it and he's like, okay, I'm just gonna do it because she does it. So you don't have to force anybody. The message here, I feel like that's what I'm trying to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that to heal your relationships, your marriage, your never attracting another toxic relationship, you focus on you.
Yes. Definitely. You focus on you. And and I could only, you speak from your experience, I speak from mine, and it was the same exact thing. We have to, I was shown that one of my life purpose is to lead by example. And I think everybody has to do that. You can't force anybody to want to start this healing journey. A lot of them, they're just not ready. Unfortunately, some of them we just have to pray for them and love them from afar, just because the relationship can become very extremely toxic, and we can't I feel like by putting our foot down and putting these boundaries, that's us speaking up
Yes.
and saying what we need to say. And some people might think it's the wrong way. I've had people tell me, you have to respond with love. I'm like, to me, this is responding with love, but I also need to love myself. I can't keep abandoning myself. I have to do what's right for me as well. When somebody is in a very toxic relationship, somebody that you love, your daughter, your son, you're not going to tell him, just keep giving love, and we'll keep praying that they change, and just keep taking the abuse. You're not going to do that to you, especially your child. You're going to tell him, you know what? Get out of this relationship. You could still love them, but you love them from afar, because obviously it's hurting you emotionally, physically, spiritually. It's making you sick. So people need to understand that also having boundaries and putting lines, it's necessary. Sometimes people need tough love. Sometimes you can't just give love to people. You have to show them tough love. It's even people with addictions and stuff. Unfortunately, that's the only way they're going to learn, or they're going to get it. But we have to learn to love ourselves first and not to abandon ourselves, and teach others that this is the way to do it. And it's a ripple effect to heal your relationships around you. even if it's from afar.
Well, yeah, because I mean, tough love to me means think about God, God like a parent will guard and protect us like you would do to a child. That's what tough love is that I am given to you as a parent to guide you, not to be your best friend because you need guidance. And that's what God does for us. And that's the best thing we can do for other people. And I'm so glad that you bring this up because I think we can get it really twisted, especially those of us that are on a healing journey or that were very spiritual. And I want to talk about like quickly about this case that I was following. I became addicted to it, and it just happened. I think it was this year. Do you remember the Micah Miller case at all? I don't know if you ever saw it.
No.
I don't I don't
Maybe if
watch
I hear you speaking about it, I'll remember, but no.
because I don't think I don't watch mainstream TV, so I don't know what goes on the news. And I saw this on TikTok, but I was so invested in it because it's exactly what you're describing. It's so this woman was married to a pastor, and the pastor, big church, Christian pastor, everybody, I don't understand how I looked at clips of his church and I'm like, who would give this guy money? Like a complete narcissist, right? Like she supposedly, and I say supposedly in quotes, it's alleged that she took her life. And she took her life. And it's just very weird because there's a lot of investigations around it. First of all, the church is now being by the FBI being like investigated because of a lot of wrongdoings that they were doing. But there's a lot of evidence that was left back where it shows that Micah Miller was being abused by this pastor who everybody thought he was like this great guy, right? And she did this video very sad right before she supposedly took her life because she never had mental health disorders. She went to go get like a breast implants apparently, and then from there he put her on like painkillers, and then he got like one of his this is bad, like he got one of his friends as a lawyer to write up a wrong like a fake prescription. I mean, this guy was a piece of work. Even with his prior marriage, the wife finally spoke up and talked about the abuse. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that is being said that he would even take her to pick up prostitutes. Like you would never think these things
This is
from
the wife. This is the
the
wife.
yeah, the wife and the husband would do this to her. And the husband was, I mean, there's so much evidence of how much he abused her. They believe that there's even evidence that he put like a tracker on her car. He was always harassing her. And what was her thing? She's like, well, God doesn't want me to have a divorce. I'm in the church. The church says that divorce is a sin. And her last video before all this happened, which he's being investigated because they actually think he may have killed her, but that this is what this will break the cases because they think that he may have even used artificial intelligence to call 911 to pretend like it was her. But the last video of her was like she had finally filed for divorce after many years where she didn't. And by the way, he knew her when she was only like 14 and 13. So they think that this started happening a long time ago. And in her video, she says, well, I think God would want me to be happy. I don't think God would want me to continue to to get abused. And that's when she finally filed for divorce. And then the next week or something, supposedly she took her life. So that's the whole thing. Ladies, ladies, like God wants love for you and you deserve it. And that is why it's so important for you to find your worth. When we come from patterns of generational trauma, especially if it has to do with abandonment or abuse, we don't know our worth and we settle. And what we're talking about here as it relates to healing yourself does not mean that then you allow people to abuse you emotionally, physically, or spiritually. That is so important because especially her, she was a religious woman, a kind woman. And she was so torn because she's like, well, if I leave him, God is gonna judge me as a sinner. And that's not what we're saying at all. What we're saying is, look, I had to do my own healing journey. And I'm very blessed as well as you are that our husbands joined us or that our husbands didn't retaliate, because it was meant to be this way. It
Yeah.
was meant to be this way. But it took us having to own our worth, having to know that we deserve better, and having to open up to allow that kind of relationship to come in. So it's so important what you just said right now, because even if it's not an abusive partner or relationship, we're talking about our parents too, where if they're abusive, your culture says you have to stay, and then you end up in really bad situations. And I don't want to go to the extremes of death and things like that, but aren't you dying inside slowly when you're betraying yourself and when you keep abandoning yourself?
Yes. And it's not just partners, romantic partners. There's friendships that can be extremely toxic. Unfortunately, family members as well. And when we say love yourself and look in the mirror, we have to accept that, not in an arrogant way of now you're going to do what I want and now you're going to bow down to me. You know what I mean? It's, you have to accept and acknowledge that we have good things about ourselves, but we also have bad things about ourselves, and we have to work on that to
Right.
find some kind of balance, because everybody has, our husbands have it as well. There's certain many good qualities in them, and then there's certain some I'm like, what did you just say right now? Like, why would you say that? You know? But you have to, it can't come as an arrogant, like, I deserve, because I see that as well too with people where they come to like, well, I deserve love. And then you start being very toxically mean to people in your family or around you, your spouses. They're like, wait a minute, this is not good either. You have to find some kind of a balance of seeing things clearly. That was one of the things I would ask God every time I would meditate and I would do my sana. Let me see everything. Let me see everything clearly as it is, and let me see everyone as clearly as they are.
Yeah.
Every day. And God was like, okay, here you go. And it was shocking at first. I was like, oh my God, this is what you're showing me. And I asked for it. I said, okay, keep bringing it on. I want to see even myself. Let
Absolutely.
me see myself clearly as I am, so I know what I need to work on.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole thing. I think because we do this work, we understand that there is darkness and light in us and in everyone. And that's the whole thing. I think we've been programmed to believe that if there's darkness in us, there's something wrong with us and we have to get rid of it and we have to pretend it's not there. When the whole thing is that sitting in these parts of ourselves that are dark, that are of these emotions of, like we were talking about in sadhana this morning, it's like that's what's going to help you know the light too. And it's going to help you learn to accept yourself in your totality so that you can stop judging other people so much. Because the reason why we judge others so much, even when it's extremes, the murder or whatever, it's because we judge ourselves that bad. And then I'm not saying condoning a murder, but I think that we could take a way different approach for all the murderers, all the abusers, to actually heal them so that they don't have to keep repeating the pattern. And that's the same thing with us, because if we don't heal ourselves, if we don't do this work of self-acceptance, not change, because healing is not changing, it's self-acceptance, then we are absolutely going to be projecting all this stuff out to all relationships. Because that's the
Yeah.
whole thing. You heal the relationship with you, and all your relationships heal. Everything around you. And the ones that need to fall apart do. And that absolutely can include family members. Absolutely. I used to be such a people pleaser back then. I didn't feel like going to a family party, and I would still go. And
Yes.
I would, and granted, many times I had to go and I would drink alcohol para soportarlo, right? To be able to withstand it. But what the
Yeah.
fuck? That put me in a worse situation because now I was angry drinking and I would tell people off, or I
Yeah.
would get into fights with people. Now, and it's not nothing negative about my family or anything like that, but if I don't feel like going somewhere, I'm not gonna go
Yeah.
because I don't feel like it, period. And that's it. That's the bottom line. They're like, ¿por qué ya no vienes? Or you used to come around. I just didn't feel like it. I don't even have to lie. Like before, oh, I was working. No, I honestly just didn't feel like it. Today, I just was not having a good day. And that's the whole thing when you start to own who you are, authentically are. Your especially intimate relationships, your husband, right? Your partner, he notices and he's like, damn, I respect her. I
Yes.
respect her because now she knows who she is. She's not a people pleaser to me or anyone. And also, by the way, she's not no longer betraying herself, which means I don't have to worry about her betraying me either.
Yes.
It's so crazy.
I see that so clearly with my husband now,
Mhm.
where when I came into myself and when
Yeah.
I finally said, okay, when I found myself again, because I lost myself somewhere along the way, when I found myself back again and started really coming into my own, I saw him that he was like, hey, ¿qué estás haciendo? Yeah, like that dynamic changed because he's like, I see you now. I see who you truly are now. And this is the person that I fell in love with, or this is the person that I knew was there. It's like we know deep down inside, but we just get lost somewhere along the way. Life happens, whatever. We don't know how to manage it. We come with all these programs, but I do see that in my husband how he sees me now, and we see each other, and he's like, oh, I like this side of you, you know?
That's because you see yourself and you see all aspects of you. That's
Yes.
the whole point. And the whole problem with the relationships is because we are so afraid that anybody will see who we truly are. Well, what about if you accept yourself? Then guess what? You're going to give off a vibe that everyone's going to be around. Ladies, you want to be magnetic, you want to be gorgeous. Why are there some women that physically they're not the most beautiful, but they get every man their aura?
Yes, they're being themselves. They're being 100% themselves.
A
Yes.
1000%. And I think that's a hard pill to swallow because a lot of the times, they say like when you're the man cheats on the girl, they always go with someone even uglier or
Yeah.
someone, like even worse than you. And it's like, it wasn't the looks, honey. It was the fact that you have walls and if you're complaining all day, and again, they're going to be like, well, you don't know what he did to me. Okay, well, you have a choice. Work on yourself. And the beautiful part about working on yourself is healing those abandonment wounds, right? Because that's where it starts. Healing the toxic masculinity or the codependency. Guess what? You're gonna win because either it's gonna become a stronger relationship or he's finally gonna leave. And guess what? You don't ever have to worry about attracting that same kind of man because you worked on yourself. Well, you're a completely different magnet. So now you should get really excited about meeting a most amazing human being out there because you have changed your frequency. That's all that it
Yeah.
is. I
And
mean,
it's not just what did he do or that person did to me, is what did I also contribute to the problem? Because I do see that as well, where people, well, you don't know what he did to me. Yeah, but what did you do to contribute to this problem? Because partnership is two. Can't
yes.
just blame the other person. We can't.
And that's the hard part, Elvira, because to admit that it takes a lot of courage
Yeah.
to be able to say I play just as much a part into this. It was much easier for me to just stay a victim. It was much easier for me to blame him that he was not this and he was not that. And that's why this healing work is shadow work and it requires a lot of courage. It's not for everyone, and people are going to get triggered. But by the same token, wow, does it completely liberate you?
It's the most rewarding thing you could possibly do. It's the most difficult, the most painful, but it's the most rewarding. It's the most liberating thing you could do.
Yeah, especially when you see your children.
Yes.
When you
Yes.
see them, then that they're not, my sons are not like desperate. They're not out there trying to find, like they're completely different. They're conscious men, they understand the power relationship. They understand that it takes a lot of work if you're going to be in a relationship, which is why, they think about it and they know their worth. They know that they don't have to sell their bodies. Because I think right now, young kids, they're so easily to do that. It's like this is how life is, especially here, in Mexico. I think it's changing a lot over there too. Now you're seeing a lot more like single moms and stuff like that, which is nothing wrong if you're a single mom. That doesn't mean that you're like a bad human being or whatever. What I'm saying is that they're thinking about it more. The younger generation, they're not. I really believe that they're more interested in generational healing than we were for sure.
Oh yes, because if you really think about it, I have even neighbors or even myself. I would date guys would come around and be like, I'll talk to him. Even if I didn't like him, I would just entertain it just because I
It
was
was
getting attention. I was feeding my ego or whatever it was. Or I have a neighbor who was telling me, she's like, I just got married so young because I just wanted to get out of the house. Now the generation now, they're taking more of their time. They're I have conversations with my kids that I could never, not even today. I cannot have these conversations with my parents. There's no way. I try to have them and they shut down real quick. I'm like, okay, they're not ready. So
Yeah.
this new generation, I'm excited. I'm
Yeah.
excited to see them because they're a lot more aware for sure.
Yeah, I feel like they are. They're very grounded. As much as they talk negative about him, about that generation, I see it differently. I see more consciousness, like more acceptance, more. Yeah, I think our generation was like probably the peak of like, even the club scene. I hear that the club scene is not even that popular anymore. I mean,
No,
when we were growing up, it was all about the club scene. But
every
nowadays,
weekend, every weekend I'm
right?
at the club. Every weekend,
That's
my
our
my girls are. I'm like, you guys don't want to go to the club, and they're like,
no. No, things have changed,
no,
which
yeah,
is it. Hopefully, that is what the good representation of it. There's also a lot more things for them to worry about now, like the drugging and all that stuff. And then that's a representation. I mean, the men that we see right now, there's a lot of healing that both men and women have to do, right? And the men, it's just an industry that has been infiltrated by pornography and all of that stuff, and now the kids have access to that since they're little. Imagine if they think that that's what intimacy is. It's pretty sad, it does program them, and we didn't have access to that growing up. So there are different challenges that they are moving through, but by the same token, we're all so connected now that like generational trauma, things like that, it pops up on their media feed, and they are starting to really understand it. So hopefully, by the way we carry ourselves, number one, and then also through what is really coming to the mainstream, like Dr. Gabor Mate and teachers like that, that they'll be able to not repeat the same mistakes we did, and they won't. If you heal yourself, they will not. They will
yes,
not.
no, they
So
won't.
it's completely worth it. So what are the last words perhaps that you would say, like for a woman who might be struggling, whether in a current marriage where she feels like it's hopeless, or perhaps someone who just feels like they just keep attracting all these toxic men in their life? What would you like tell them for last minute words?
They need to they need to learn how to love themselves and give themselves time. A lot of times, we have a tendency, because I think I did it as well. We come out of one relationship and we jump straight into the other one, and we need to give ourselves time to heal
Yeah.
and really get to know ourselves, who we truly are, who we truly want to be,
Mhm.
and what life we truly want to have. So we don't continue these patterns. I just saw somebody on Instagram post, um, somebody that I had helped purchase a house, and I had noticed that they split. But I just she posted something where I guess he would physically abuse her, and she finally had the courage to get out. And a lot of times when you start young in high school or whatever, you have more of an attachment to someone. Even as adults, we get these attachments because we're already coming into the relationship not loving ourselves. So what better way to, even as young as you are, as old as you are, just learn how to love yourself, find out who you truly are, who you truly want to be, and what life you want to have, and then from there go on, and then you'll find him so quick. He'll come. He or she will come.
Yeah.
You
Oh my
won't
God.
even have to look.
Yeah, that's the perfect advice, because if we did that, you wouldn't attract also someone else who didn't honor themselves and who didn't love themselves. You would basically attract someone that was also whole and complete, because that's how you are. It's when we think we need a relationship, which again, it goes back to this whole self-worth and being okay with being with yourself. If you have not healed the relationship with you, you cannot be alone with you. I mean, prior to this healing work, I never traveled by myself alone. I never ate lunch by myself alone. I never did anything alone because I could not be with myself alone. Now, I mean, I took my first like little trip to Sedona. I was like, this is wonderful by myself, you know.
I still can't eat by myself. I'll go outside and I'll sit outside the restaurant. I'm like, I can't do this. Uh, I need to do it. I have to do it. I'll do it next week.
You gotta
I have
try
to push myself to do it, to go eat by myself and just sit at a restaurant by
it.
myself.
I
And then
have,
we'll think about the traveling.
yeah, exactly. The coffee shops I can
Baby
do.
steps.
Right? But Sedona is great by yourself because literally you're in nature, so you can only imagine knowing nothing around you. But I thought it was amazing. But it was also because I also felt very guilty, you know, prior to that. Like I gotta take the kids with me. Growing up, I mean, we had our children young, so it's almost like you're always with someone. But ladies, the only reason why you really can't be with yourself is because you got to heal that relationship because you do need time for yourself just to process and to feel all these things that you're feeling. And I would say the same thing as you. It to close, it's a it's a mental mind healing that needs to happen within you where a lot of work of forgiveness does have to take place for first whoever you consider to be your biggest Judas and then for yourself.
Okay,
Exactly.
where are Judases?
Exactly. So it was twofold for me. It was that, it was the spiritual psychotherapy, the forgiveness work, but then the nervous system. You know, when I started to change my nervous system regulation through Kundalini yoga meditation, you know, that's why I have tolerance now. I look at my parents and the older they get, if they don't do meditation, their nervous systems are going to get worse. So it's not a mystery why they get mad over the stupidest little thing. I used to be like that too, all the time. Now that my nervous system is more regulated, I don't take things personal. So not only did it help me break the pattern of this toxicity, but it now keeps me in a sustained neutrality because stuff still happens, you know, different, not like before, right? Now it's I'm hangry or I'm deciding where to go to travel. I want to go here versus there. Nothing crazy like that, right? But before we used to make that into the biggest problem.
Yeah.
Everything was a problem. So now it's not like that. I have a lot of compassion for him. I see the Christ in him because I see it in myself. But it does take, and this is what traditional marriage counseling doesn't offer. You can talk about it all you want, which for me was even worse. But if you don't get to the root cause, which is your own inner child healing and his, which he can do on his own way in his own path, then not only are you going to repeat the pattern with that relationship, but you're going to keep repeating it even with the next one and the next one and the next one.
And
So
then your kids see that and then they keep repeating it. That's a problem. And if people spiritually don't believe in in yoga or Kundalini yoga, go outside,
absolutely.
get on the grass, let the sun hit you,
That's
journal,
mm,
or just sit there.
yeah, absolutely.
Meditation, I don't think that anybody has a problem with meditation, any religion, but I mean, at least, just sit there,
Yeah.
feel your feelings. Because a lot of times we're so rushed, we don't feel. We don't give
Yeah.
ourselves the time to feel.
Yeah. I am so glad you said that. And especially the sun. I heard the other day that, and it was a message for me because I wear contacts. So it was like the message was you need to go out into the sun and stare at the sun, but take your contacts off. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I wear contacts all day, so I never get real good sun like from into my eyes. It's very healing. It's very, very nurturing. But yeah, do something that will basically keep you out of the program. And nature is so amazing. And pick a, you know, dedicated time where you're going to be consistent about it because that's the whole thing. It's not overnight. But what is, you know, even if you were to go to the doctor and they gave you a pill, it's not going to be overnight. It's going to take a little bit of time for that to kick in, right? So, yes, find your path, holistic healing, whatever that looks like, but do something about it and stop. I would say stop focusing so much on the relationship and start focusing on the relationship you have with you. When you do that, then everything else around you heals.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
that's this podcast episode. Anything else before we close out?
No, I think we covered everything.
Yes, and if you any of you have any questions, feel free to, of course, post them below in the comments. We read them, we respond to them. Also, our contact information is below here. So if you would like to reach out to us personally in a private message, you can do that via Instagram. It's the easiest way. Or again, sending us a private message on this platform. So we hope that today's episode offered you insights and practical guidance for transforming generational relationship patterns of toxicity so that you can step into healthier, more fulfilling relationships because you deserve them. Remember that breaking these cycles begins with recognizing the inherited patterns first, working through forgiveness, and also cultivating a strong nervous system so that you can know your worth and so that you can attract and align with also relationships that not only see that in you, but that also they see that in themselves. We hope that this episode has helped you in breaking the pattern and that you can continue on this journey with an open heart, knowing that you're also guided and protected. So until next time, keep nurturing that inner sovereignty and that inner radiance. We'll see you all next week. Satnam.